Hello everyone and welcome once again to Zenith Academy Online. Today we are doing part 2 of the chapter Improvement in Food Resources for CBSE class 9, and this is the last chapter of their science book. So let's begin with part 2. Those who haven't watched part 1, you can go to the description box or you can go here on the I button and see part 1. Let's begin. So in this part, we'll be talking about crop production improvement. So let's study what is crop production management. So crop production management is the process that is used to effectively cultivate and harvest crops. तो हम कल्टीवेट तो करते ही हैं, हार्वेस्ट भी करते हैं, बट क्रॉप प्रोडक्शन मैनेजमेंट एक ऐसा प्रोसेस है जिससे हम ये चीज़ इफेक्टिवली कर पाएँ. Now, nutrient management. We all know that a plant gets its nutrients from air, water and soil. Now, there are total 16 nutrients, 16 nutrients which are essential for plants. Air supplies carbon and oxygen, hydrogen comes from water, and soil supplies the other 13 nutrients to plants. So what is air supplying? Air is supplying carbon and oxygen, water is supplying hydrogen, and soil is supplying the remaining 13 nutrients. So total 13 plus 1 14 plus 1 15 and 1 16. Total 16 nutrients which are essential for plants. Now nutrient management is done. How nutrient management is done? By supplying the soil with required nutrients by adding fertilizers and manures. So how is nutrient management done? By supplying the soil with required nutrients by adding fertilizers and manures. Let's go ahead. Now what are macronutrients? Macro, okay, macronutrients. So among the 13 essential nutrients, 6 are the essential nutrients required in abundance. So macro means in abundance or in large quantities. So those nutrients which are required in large quantities or in abundance for the essential growth and development of plant is known as macronutrients. Now these essential nutrients are collectively called macronutrients. Now you should know what are these 6 macronutrients. You should remember their names. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, sulfur and magnesium. These are the macronutrients. I am repeating: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, sulfur and magnesium. These are the 6 essential nutrients which are required in large quantity. Now micro. So among these 13 essential nutrients, 6 are classified as macro and the other 7 are classified into micronutrients. So they include iron, boron, chlorine, manganese, zinc, copper and molybdenum. So they are required in very small quantities, So very trace amount. Trace means very small. So that is why they are also called as trace minerals. Now manure. What is manure? It is an organic matter which is obtained from the solid wastes of animals, humans, sludge, sewage, domestic waste, decomposed dead plants and animals and other plant waste. Now the plant waste can include dry leaves, twigs, agricultural waste, weeds, etc. So basically you have to remember manure is organic matter obtained from solid waste of animals, humans, then all these sludge, sewage, domestic waste, agricultural waste, etc. Now it contains a huge quantity of nutrients which improves the soil quality and increases the yield of the healthy crops. Yield means production of healthy crops. Now let's talk about compost and vermicompost. Now what is compost or what is composting? It is the process in which biological waste material is decomposed in pits. Pits means खड्डे या गड्ढे जिसे हम कहते हैं, is known as composting. So composting is a process in which all the biological waste is dumped into the pits and then it is allowed to stay there and decompose. So then what is vermicompost? Okay, so when this compost is prepared by using earthworms, can you see in the hands? Can you see in this soil? There are earthworms. So when compost is prepared by using earthworms to hasten the process or to fasten the process, this is called vermicompost. So what are earthworms, my dear students? Earthworms hasten or increases or fasten the process. They help in decomposing the organic waste material. सो उसको तोड़ने में, उसको डीकम्पोज करने में अर्थवर्म हेल्प करते हैं, जिसकी वजह से कंपोस्ट बहुत जल्दी फॉर्म हो जाता है. सो दैट इज वाई वी deliberately add earthworms in the soil or in the compost so that the process becomes fast. Now what is green manure? So I'll show you this video first. Wait, this is so if you see this, what is happening here? So now prior to sowing of the crop seeds डालने के पहले, है ना, some plants like sun hemp or guar are grown and then mulched by plowing them into the soil. तो पहले हम सन हेम्प या ग्वार जैसे कुछ प्लांट्स उगाते हैं और फिर उनको सॉइल में डाल देते हैं प्लोइंग के थ्रू. तो आपने देखा ये जो ग्रीन प्लांट्स जिसे डाला जा रहा था, आपको जो ग्रेइश ब्राउनिश ग्रीनिश जो चीज़ दिख रही थी, उसको फिर से सॉइल में डाला जा रहा है. सो ग्रीन क्रॉप्स, ग्रीन मैन्योर क्या होते हैं? ये क्रॉप ही होते हैं, प्लांट्स लाइक सन हेम्प और गुआर. They are grown specifically for building and maintaining soil fertility and structure. Okay. Now, though they may also have other functions, they are normally incorporated back into the soil either directly or after removal and composting. या तो इन्हें डायरेक्टली ही सॉइल में प्लो करके डाल दिया जाता है या इसे रिमूव करते हैं, जैसा कि आपने इस वीडियो में देखा. उसको थोड़ा कंपोस्ट भी कर सकते हैं और फिर उसको वापस सॉइल में डालते हैं. सो दीज ग्रीन प्लांट्स thus turn into green manure which helps in enriching the soil nutrients. तो soil के nutrient को बढ़ाने के लिए ये काम आता है और क्योंकि ये crops या green plant से ही बना है इसलिए इसे हम green manure कहते हैं. I hope this is clear what is green manure and I hope that you have understood the difference between manure and green manure. Right, let's go ahead. Fertilizers. अब हमने पढ़ा कि मैन्योर क्या होता है. अब फर्टिलाइजर्स क्या है? फर्टिलाइजर्स आर कमर्शियली प्रोड्यूस्ड प्लांट न्यूट्रिएंट्स, मतलब आर्टिफिशियल है ये. दे आर कमर्शियली प्रोड्यूस्ड प्लांट न्यूट्रिएंट्स विच आर रिक्वायर्ड इन स्मॉल क्वांटिटीज. Now there are various brands of fertilizers that are available in the market. You can see from the picture. The person is spreading these nutrients. They have purchased it from the market and spreading it in the soil. Now the most common example of fertilizer is NPK fertilizer. Very important from board exam point of view. एकदम अच्छे से याद करना. NPK fertilizer which provides nitrogen. Okay, N stands for nitrogen, P stands for phosphorus. Okay, and K stands for potassium. The symbol of potassium is K, symbol of phosphorus is P, symbol of nitrogen is N. So NPK, please remember this, very important from board point of view. Next, organic farming. What is organic farming? As the name suggests, it is a farming system with minimal or no use of chemicals as fertilizers. So we do not use any chemical as fertilizer. and with maximum input of organic manure. So what we do is we add a lot. We use manures but we don't use fertilizers. I hope this is very clear to you all. Let's go ahead. Now, all resources are used optimally to get maximum chemical free yield. So, we use all the other resources also of farming very optimally, perfectly, judiciously, so that we get maximum yield and the yield which is chemical free, so that it is very good for the consumption of human beings. There are no artificial fertilizers, there are no chemical, we avoid spreading of pesticides and other chemicals, and we use all the resources which are available to us organically, and we use all the other resources also optimally. Now irrigation, we all know irrigation. Now irrigation is the artificial process of applying water to crops to fulfill their water requirements. Okay? So the definition has to be perfect. It has to apply all the keywords. So irrigation doesn't mean only watering of plants. Many students say, ma'am, watering of plants is also correct. No. Irrigation is artificial process of applying water to crops. Why do we do that? To fulfill their water requirements. Now there are different types of irrigation practiced for improving the crop yield. Now this process helps in ensuring that the crops get water at the right stages. That is, now what are the right stages? During the growing season, which helps in increasing the expected yields of crops. So there are different stages, okay, when water is given to it. So during the whole growing season, there are 2 to 3 stages where we have to ensure that proper watering has happened. Okay. So this process helps in ensuring that the crop gets water at the right stage, that is during the growing season, which helps in increasing the expected yields of the crops. Now it is done with the help of canals, wells, river lift system, tanks, rainwater harvesting and watersheds. This is again important whenever you are asked what is irrigation. Just write the definition first. Even if it is for 2 marks, you have to write how it is done. Okay, if it is asked why it is done, for why improving the crop yield. How? By using these things. Okay, so this is very important. Next, cropping pattern. Now cropping pattern refers to proportion of area under various crops. So if we take different crops, how much area a particular crop is covering, that is a cropping pattern, the proportion of area. Now there are 3 types of cropping patterns. First is intercropping, second is crop rotation, and third is mixed cropping. So let's talk about all 3 of them. First let's talk about intercropping. So if you see the picture here, if you see this icon here, there is a crop and in between there is another crop. If you see here the picture, real picture also, you can see these lines of crops, but in between there is another crop grown. Can you see these crops? So in rows they are grown. So it is a cropping technique in which 2 or more crops are cultivated simultaneously on the same piece of land, adhering to a specific row pattern. Children, you have to pay attention. You have to use this word in a particular row pattern. Specific pattern is followed. It is not random that first you grow plant 1, then you grow plant 2, then you grow plant 3, then again you grow plant 3 or 1 or 2. No, this is not there. It has to be a specific row pattern. Maybe 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 and so on. Right? I hope this is very, very clear. Okay. Now, this type of cropping pattern helps in increasing the productivity of the crops. Therefore, it is followed by many small farmers who are completely dependent on rainfall for the better yield. So, who practices it? Mostly small farmers can practice this to increase the productivity of crops, especially those who are dependent on rainfall for better yield. Next is crop rotation. As the diagram also completely justifies that there are different crops. Okay, so it's a cropping technique which is practiced for growing different crops on the same land in pre-planned succession. जैसे कि पहले हमने इस सीजन में गाजर उगाई. Okay, in this season we have sown carrots. So once the whole cultivation is done, the whole harvesting is done, then you give seeds of another plant. When that is harvested, then you sow another plant, that way. So at one particular time only one plant is growing, one crop is growing. So the crops are selected based on their duration, है ना, कि for how long does it take to get the yield of this particular, how long does it take to get the harvesting done for this crop. So crops are selected based on their duration on the 1 year rotation, 2 year rotation or 3 year rotation. Now let's study the third. Now in crop rotation, if you see this, I'll explain you. Okay, a difference between monocropping and crop rotation. See, growing the same crop in the same place for many years in a row is known as monocropping. एक ही crop बहुत टाइम तक हम उगा रहे हैं, हर बार वही crop उगा रहे हैं. That is known as monocropping. Now this gradually depletes the soil of certain nutrients and selects for both a highly competitive pest and weed community. Now what does it mean? If you keep on growing one particular plant, right, so some type of pest which infests that crop or that plant will dominate there, है ना, that will become very strong. The pest will become very strong there, okay, and a particular weed which grows there. So the pest and weed community both becomes very highly competitive, and then they remain there for a longer period of time. So I'll read this again for you. Growing the same crop in the same place for many years in a row is known as monocropping, and it gradually depletes the soil of certain nutrients and selects for two disadvantages, both a highly competitive pest and weed community. Now see this diagram. A well-designed crop rotation can reduce the need for synthetic fertilizers and herbicides by better using the ecosystem services from a diverse set of crops. Additionally, crop rotations can improve the soil structure and organic matter, which reduces the soil erosion, and it increases the farm system resilience. Now what is farm system resilience? The ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. So I'll explain this to you in detail. So suppose once you are growing this plant, another season you are growing this plant, right? So what is happening now? Suppose this plant is nitrogen fixing plant, and it has rhizobium bacteria which fixes the atmospheric nitrogen. So now once you grow these plants, so beans for example are these type of plants. So what happens? The soil fertility is regained. So for the next crop, again the soil is automatically fertile. Also, when you keep on changing the plants, first of all it increases the soil structure, it increases the organic matter. Okay. Now when you keep on changing this plants, then or the type of crops, then what happens? The weeds cannot grow because weeds cannot grow. The pests also, they are confused. Okay. So it reduces also. Sometimes if suppose some crop has not worked well, right, so there's a misfortune or there's some change in the season, it has not grown well, but then it prepares the farm, okay, and so next time when you're growing something else, it will grow, right? First the crop has failed due to some reason, due to some misfortune. The next time if you grow the same plant, again that misfortune will happen, but if you grow some other plant, okay, it will grow. So the farms, it is called, it increases farm system resilience, means it is now being able to recover from, or it can adjust easily to any change. Okay, so I hope this is very clear. It uses the ecosystem. When you keep on changing the crops, it uses the ecosystem for your benefit. Now comes mixed cropping. So as the picture suggests, it refers to a cropping system where two or more crops are cultivated on the same piece of land simultaneously. एक साथ दो या दो से ज़्यादा क्रॉप उगाए जाते हैं. अब यहाँ बहुत सारे बच्चे कंफ्यूज्ड होते हैं कि व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन मिक्स्ड क्रॉपिंग and intercropping. See, in intercropping also it was the same. Two or more crops are cultivated simultaneously on the same piece of land. Again I am saying in mixed cropping also two or more crops are cultivated simultaneously on the same piece of land. But here if you see, there is a pattern, specific row pattern. But here mixed cropping, there is no pattern. So it refers to a cropping system where two or more crops are cultivated on the same piece of land simultaneously. That's it. That is why I say when you write the definition, it has to be very specific. In mixed cropping, there is no pattern, whereas in intercropping, there is a fixed pattern. Okay. Now this technique is most commonly followed by farmers. So this is the most commonly followed, as it reduces the risk of total crop failure because of less rainfall or adverse climatic conditions. So suppose you are growing to maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 plants. Now this plant, now suppose there is a less rainfall in that particular season, less rainfall. Okay. So if all the plants, or if there is one single crop, if it doesn't grow in less rainfall, then the whole crop failure happens. But if there are one or two plants that can thrive even in very less rainfall, then you don't have to face the total crop failure. So even if this plant suppose doesn't thrive in less rainfall, so this will die out, but the other three will grow. I hope this is very clear. Now this is very important to understand the difference between intercropping and mixed cropping. So let me explain you this. In intercropping, the main objective, what is the main objective? Is to utilize the space left between the rows of main crops. So there's one main crop and there's some space in between the main crops. So to utilize that space, we grow something else which doesn't not require so much space. So this is intercropping. The main objective is to utilize the space left in between the rows. Whereas in mixed cropping, the main objective is to get at least one crop in favorable condition. Even if one dies, the other will be there in that particular condition. Now the main difference is here the specific planting pattern is followed. Here no planting pattern is followed. Correct? Then here different fertilizers and pesticides are used for different crops. So there are in particular rows, so different fertilizers are used for different crops. So suppose there is plant A and B. Okay. Now here you spray a particular type of pesticide or fertilizer, and here you spread some other type of pesticide. Again, if there is A, you spread one type of pesticide. Again, if here is B, you spread some other types. So for each of them, different fertilizers are used. Now in mixed cropping, same fertilizers and pesticides are used for all of the crops. All of them uses the same fertilizer and pesticide. Here seeds aren't mixed before sowing. They are done in proper pattern, so seeds are not mixed. Whereas in mixed cropping, seeds are mixed before sowing. So before putting it, the seeds are mixed. So mixed, all of them are growing together. Now this is followed to increase the productivity of the crops, and this is followed, the mixed cropping is followed to reduce the risk of crop failure, as I explained you. To reduce the risk of crop failure due to unfavorable climatic conditions. Now here let me, so there is a considerable difference in the life cycle and the duration of maturity in different crops. So if there are two crops A and B, so both of them will have a considerable difference in the life cycle. Suppose one is taking maturity period of 1 year, another is maybe taking only 3 months. So there is a difference in life cycle. Now here, if you see, all crops have a similar life cycle and duration of maturity. So we select such crops that have a similar life cycle and duration of maturity. So when you harvest them, it is easier for you, because here you are doing it in any pattern. You are not following any pattern. I hope the major differences between intercropping and mixed cropping are solved. Now let's come back to crop protection management. Till now we were talking about high yield and a high production. Now let's talk about protection. So field crops are usually infested by large number of weeds, insects, pests and diseases from which the crop should be protected. So that is why we should understand what is crop protection management. Now let's talk about weeds. What are weeds? Weeds are the unwanted plants that keeps on growing along with the main crops, right? So weeds are unwanted plants in the cultivated field, consuming all the soil nutrients and finally reducing the crop yield. So these are the few examples of weeds. So if you see a main farm, there are many unnecessary or unwanted plants that keeps on growing in between. Now when these plants grow, they will obviously take some nutrients from the soil, and our main plant, our main crop that we want to grow will not be able to get so much nutrients because this unnecessary or unwanted plant has taken some of the nutrients. So the yield or the production of the main crop may get affected. So what are weeds? Weeds are unwanted plants. So let's see how we can protect against weeds. So what are the protection methods? So following methods are observed. First is preparing a good seed bed. So when you are preparing the bed of in the farm, okay, for the seeds to be sown, you have to prepare it very nicely so that there are no undergrowths or no other seeds there, right? Second, mechanical removal of the weeds. Can you see here? This is how he is removing the weeds mechanically. He is uprooting them. He is uprooting the unnecessary plants. This is how you can do this. So that's the second method. Third, plant the seeds in a timely fashion. Plant the seeds in a timely fashion. So whichever type of cropping you are doing, okay, particular time you plant that seed so that the weeds cannot grow all together, right? Only your crop grows. So plant that seed at that particular season, at that particular time. Now let's talk about effects of insects and pests on crop. Insect pests attack the plants in the following ways. How do they do? First, they cut the root, stem and leaves of the plant. So have you seen? They go inside the roots, stems and leaves and they cut it. Second, they suck the cell sap. So we know the cells have sap in it, the liquid part of the cells. We all have studied about this, okay, in our first chapter. So they suck the cell sap. First chapter of biology we have studied. So they suck all the nutrients. So they suck the cell sap from the various parts of the plant. Third is they bore into the stems. खड्डा करके, है ना, होल बना के उसमें चले जाते हैं अंदर, resulting in reduction in yields. So once in the wheat, suppose they bore into the fruit, they bore into the wheat fruit. So we will not be taking that, right? The yield will decrease. The farmer will not be able to sell that particular wheat or that particular crop in which there are holes. So first they cut the root, stem and leaves of the plant. Second, they suck the cell sap. Third, they bore into the stems and fruits, resulting in reduction in yields. Now, pesticides and insecticides. Pesticides and insecticides are those chemicals that are used to kill or destroy the pests and other insects that cause extensive damage to the stored and freshly harvested crops. So pesticides and insecticides kills those insects and pests, cause extensive damage to stored and freshly harvested crops. So wherever they are stored, okay, you sprinkle pesticides and insecticides there, and once you have harvested the crops, then you spray that, okay. Now these chemicals are basically toxic in nature. Now fungi and viruses. Fungi and viruses are disease causing harmful microorganisms which affect both the plants and the newly yielded crops. So they can affect the plant when it is growing, and once you have harvested, then also the newly yielded crops, that also can be infected by fungi and viruses, okay. Now they are called pathogens because they are causing disease. Disease causing organisms are called pathogens. So fungi and viruses are the simple term or the common term we can say pathogens. Right. So these pathogens are destructive as they destroy huge farms of crops. Now let's talk about few examples of plant viruses. Okay. So we'll be talking about fungi and viruses. So first virus. See this tobacco mosaic virus. You can see the normal leaf and the leaf infested with tobacco mosaic virus. Children, you have to learn these names. Okay. So few example of plant virus, tobacco mosaic virus, cauliflower mosaic virus. You can see the yellow patches here. That's because of the virus. And cucumber mosaic virus. You can see they are all distorted and yellow patches are there. Now these are disease causing fungi. Okay, leaf rust. You can see the red patches. It looks like rust. Stem rust. The reddish brown patches on the stems and powdery mildew. Okay, it looks like as if you have spread some powder on it. Okay, so please learn these names. Three disease causing fungi and 3 disease causing viruses. Now herbicides and fungicides. Now they are highly toxic chemicals that are used to kill fungi and unwanted vegetation, that is weeds. Now one of the types of losses, one of the major type of losses from the yield is storage losses. So after harvesting, after cutting down the crops, the newly obtained food grains are stored in huge storage facilities such as silos. You can see the pictures of silos here on the screen. However, due to attack from pests or waterlogging, if there is rainfall and water goes inside or the water gets collected on the farm, it's not running, it gets collected, that is called waterlogging. So due to attack from pests or waterlogging, the food grains get destroyed, and this type of loss is known as storage loss. We lose the crop, the yielded crop, when they were stored in the silos. So how can we avoid it, and what are the factors that are affecting storage loss? So it is the loss caused to the post harvest system. We have harvested and post harvesting the loss is caused, that is called storage loss. Okay. Now the factors affecting the storage loss include both abiotic and biotic factors. So let's list few of them. Now storage loss due to living organisms such as insects, rodents like rats, mice, etc. Fungi, mites and bacteria are biotic factors. You must have understood now. Now losses due to non-living organisms such as moisture, pani, temperatures in the place of storage is called abiotic factors. So two factors, biotic and abiotic. So insects, rodents, fungi, mites, bacteria are biotic factors, whereas moisture and temperature is the abiotic factor for storage loss. Now how can we prevent and how can we control this? Strict cleaning of produce before storage. So when we are storing, we have to clean it properly so that there is no single pest. If there is a single pest, it will keep on multiplying and it will be there on every grain. Second, fumigation using chemicals that can kill pests. So before storing or during storing, you fumigate the whole place. We had seen that picture of the man fumigating it. Then proper drying of the products first in the sunlight. So when you are harvesting it, sometimes due to irrigation, due to sprinkling, there is moisture. And once you pack it with the same moisture, there will be loss. There will be fungus creating on it. So proper drying of the product first in sunlight and then in the shade. So these are the 3 protocols that we can follow. Strict cleaning, fumigation using chemicals and proper drying of the product. So that was all about, my dear students. If you have liked this, do give a thumbs up, write in your comment section below, and do not forget to subscribe to Zenith Academy Online. So tomorrow we are again coming with part 3 of the chapter where we'll be talking about cattle rearing, poultry farming and other things. So basically in part 3 we'll be talking about animal husbandry. So do not forget to watch that video as well and keep the learning always on Zenith Academy Online. Thank you my dear students.